We are now live. We're a few minutes early, so we'll just be patient. Welcome to those of you who have joined us. As you can see, I'm with my friend Darryl Robert Schoon. We are 4 minutes ahead of the scheduled time, and I see that everything is working smoothly. So we'll just be patient for a few minutes, and then we'll start promptly at the top of the hour. But if you want to say anything to the early birds.
Jeffrey.
Are you muted?
There's an echo here. When you were talking, there was a delay, and then your voice was.
You're not on the YouTube channel, I presume. Yeah, there is a delay between Zoom and YouTube.
I'm hearing your voice, so I'm hearing.
Oh.
Yeah, that's not working.
You're having trouble hearing me.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try and speak louder.
I see. Martha, are you there? No. Yeah. There's a problem here. Can you come in? Well, no, I hear you, but I hear the delay. So I hear the voice. No, it's not your voice. See, I'm hearing.
Oh, it's like it's playing back.
I'm hearing a repeat.
Yeah, we're having some audio problems on Zoom.
Yeah,
but we're scheduled to begin in 2 minutes. So, do you think you can make it work anyway?
I don't know what to do. Not this way.
I can hear you.
Because I'm hearing a repeat as I'm talking to you.
Could it be on our end, Jeffrey? Should I?
You know what? Close everything on your computer but the Zoom window.
All right. Now let's talk.
I can hear you fine.
No, I can't hear you.
Well, make sure. Do you need headphones? Is your audio, is there a problem? Somebody is telling us to put on headphones. That might help, but I'm not having any trouble with the audio.
All right. Martha's bringing me headphones.
The questions are coming in a mile a minute here. I have these, but I'm not even going to use them because my audio is functioning very well. Okay, now is that any better?
Yes.
Good. Okay, well, good, because it's the top of the hour right now. So we're going to start. I'm with my friend Darryl Robert Schoon. Darryl is a spiritualist.
No, I'm hearing this. It's on. I'm hearing it. I'm hearing that repeat. It's even louder. It's even louder with that on.
Darryl, mute your mic if you're talking.
I hear him through here.
All right. Hold on. Maybe I can mute you. There we go. All right. We're having some audio problems, people. So I hope you'll just be patient with us for a few minutes. Darryl seems to be getting some unusual feedback with or without the headphones. I don't know what happened, but we're hearing from viewers that they love us, Darryl, and just be patient. We'll get this going.
Maybe it's we're off mute now. How did I get on mute. Okay, I think we're on.
All right.
Can you hear me, Jeffrey?
I can hear you.
I think we're all right now. I was on mute and it was feedback. No. No.
Oh, that's okay. We can do it.
Let's try it.
Jeff may not have pressed the live button beneath. Yeah, no, we're live.
5 minutes.
Oh,
No, it's really bad.
it's really bad. In other words, you're getting an echo.
Yes, a real strong echo, probably 2 minutes later.
All right. Do you have any other channels or programs open on your computer?
Yes.
Close everything but Zoom. Especially if you have YouTube open. You should close YouTube.
Oh, oh. Okay, Jeffrey, can you hear us now?
I can hear you.
That sounds okay.
How come I can't see him? I can.
He's looking
Yeah,
look up here.
but I put it in. Can you?
I'm trying to get the window up. Can you work with that?
Yeah. Okay.
I can hear you perfectly.
All right. We'll see if there's an echo. I think yeah, the windows are all closed. All right, let's go.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. I think we've solved the technical problem. We're just 3 minutes late. It's not too bad. Once again, I'm delighted to be with my good friend, Darryl Robert Schoon, somebody I've known since 1971. I recall nearly half a century. So we've seen lots of ups and downs together.
Yeah. Yeah.
For both of us. I know we're getting some questions already from our viewers, Darryl. I'll give you an easy one.
Yes. All right. Let's see what you consider easy, Jeffrey.
If you were to sing a song with me in karaoke, what song would you choose?
It would be one that you couldn't hear. It would be at a audible level that is above or below the receptivity of the normal human being. I would lip sync it. That's what they told me to do whenever I was in a choir, is to lip sync.
Now, to be fair, Darryl, I think it's worth letting our viewers know that you are a musician. You write songs and you perform. You play the piano beautifully.
Yes, that was a previous incarnation.
Okay, here's a serious question from Philip Bernhardt House, who has also been a guest on this program. Let me just mention, Philip, thank you for joining us, and our viewers would be very happy to check out the videos that we've done on polytheism. Here's his question, Darryl. Darryl, based on your predictions of the 2008 economic crash and the time of the vulture, what do you think will happen in the aftermath of the current one in terms of failed policies?
This is a question, excellent question. All I know is this, that the present paradigm is going to collapse. And that it's sort of like asking what the future will look like as the present reality is crumbling. All I know is that a new reality will take its place. This is like, Jeffrey, we've discussed this before in paradigm shifts, that when a paradigm collapses, a new one is about to take its place. But just as much as we could not have seen in the midst of the Black Plague, when the medieval world was dying, literally and figuratively dying in Europe, the Renaissance, which would arise out of the ashes. So the idea of what the interim is going to look like, or the transition is going to look like, I have no idea. We may go back to barter in some form. There may be some way there. I believe that, one of the things that I realized about change was that, and this is the metaphor about change, is that if you put a pot on to boil with water to make tea, and you finally hear the teapot going, your mind goes, oh, it's changed. Well, the truth is, it's always been changing. It's only when you hear the sound of the teapot that you go, oh, it's changed. What it means is, you really mean is it's ready, all right? But for the moment that you put the teapot on, that you put water into it, the change was going. All right. So we are seeing what we call reality is what I call a precipitate of thought. It's the resolution of intention, thought, of creation. And what we're seeing is the result of that. All right. A moving, expanding precipitate of all our consciousness, thought. Now, what we are witnessing as co-creators, and I would say that in a very small sense, because what we're co-creating has less to do with our own individual intent here than a greater intent. We're watching the collapse of a massive paradigm, I think a paradigm that is in part of it, which has been in place since the beginning of time. The imbalance between the male and the female, the imbalance between spirit and will, the imbalance between thought and emotion. All right. And so when you're dealing with change at that level, the collapse is even more intense. And to predict or to see what it is, I can't. All I know is even what I predicted in the time of the vulture is not yet here. I expect that the collapse that I predicted in the time of the vulture, when they say the passions of the bull lay buried deep beneath the rubble of economic collapse, is not there yet. Because there's still enough, there's enough floating around still, so the very rich are still very rich, and the rest of us are on life support. So we're not even in the time of the vulture, technically.
Here's a question. Somebody is asking for the titles of all of your published works. Now, they're listed on the YouTube channel. If people go to our listings page, or to any of the previous videos, but would you mind just listing all of your, I think you've got 5 or 6 books.
In fact, I'll go through them with the time that they came. And what I'd like to add as a part of it is, I never intended to write a book in my life. All right. The first book I wrote, I think you're one of the very few people ever to read. It was a novel called, because they were published at different times. But it was a novel that's now out called You Can't Always Get What You Want. And that it came to me as a download, all right? 32 chapters, equal amount over a period of 6 months. It was a novel. The second book that I wrote, but they're all, like I'm saying, they're not published sequentially. It was called Light in a Dark Place, all right? And I wrote this in the year 2000, and it's a collection of writings that I did while in prison. All right. Now, in retrospect, I realized a very fascinating thing, because the third book I wrote is called Time of the Vulture. All right. And it was my it was a book where I posted in 2007, predicting the economic collapse in 2008. And what I realized in retrospect, Jeffrey, looking at my life, is that my life has been so intense and so much stuff has happened to me. The quote that came to me about the time of the vulture, it came to me when I was in prison. And so rightfully, I should have had that in my book, Light in a Dark Place. All right. But my life is so, I don't even know how to describe it, is that I didn't even put that in there, that this was something that a writing that came to me during my period in prison. So be that as it may, in 2007, I posted a book, A Time of the Vulture, which predicted the economic collapse, which happened a year and a half later. The next two books were quite interesting. It was called The Way to Heaven and Is God Confused? And the genesis of those, because it came when my friend Marshall asked me, he had a writing project. And I remember, Jeffrey, I was in Costco. The phone call comes in. I'm talking to my friend Marshall on the phone. He's suggesting a writing project. And by the time I walked out of Costco, I saw what the books were going to look like. I saw it. There were going to be a series of sentences and images. All right. It's where you turn the pages. I didn't even know what the books were, but I saw it. All right. 2 to 3 weeks later, both books were written. They're very short because they're just one sentence long on a page and the next page, They're images. And those were the books, Is God Confused and The Way to Heaven. The last book that I wrote was the one came out last year, which led to us having this being right here, is called Letter to the House Select Committee on Intelligence. And that had to do, so that's a series that even led to, because I sent you the manuscript of that book and you got that. It was a year ago, Jeffrey, in 2019 that we began. You contacted me and said, Darryl, maybe we should have an interview about conspiracies. So that's it.
Now you also have Is God Confused?
Yes. Well, that's it. Is God Confused and The Way to Heaven. Those are the two books that came to me after I wrote my book on the economy. So they're all over the place. I mean, it's just the only thing I can say that they have in common is that I wrote them. And even then, I can't even take credit for that because the first one was clearly a download. All right. The second was sort of inspirational stuff that came to me in prison. And the third one was a result of an inspirational thought I had about the economy. That was the one I've probably written more than most.
Here's a question from Ireland. In your opinion, what is the most effective way to interact with a Trump supporter?
Very good. Take a deep breath and meditate. The truth of the matter is this. Everyone, we're all walking around in discrete, separate realities. Don Juan's book, A Separate Reality, is in truth describes each one of our worlds. All right? I would imagine that if the person who asked that question has brothers and sisters, they could use the same question in, how do I deal with my sister? Or how, at least I do with mine. All right. And the question is, you got to realize everybody lives in a separate world with separate experiences and separate truths. All right. And one of the things I wrote in Light in the Dark Place was, how do you know what is true when the world only reflects what you think? All right. The Trump supporter sees only what he sees, just as we see only what we see. All right. Because I'm speaking here, I'm not a Trump supporter. All right. So I would venture to say that the person who asked the question sees pretty much what I see. But I also understand that Trump supporter doesn't see it at all. So discussing details or why or how it really is futile. Absolutely futile. And if pursued upon, will lead ultimately to yelling, screaming, loss of relationships, anything. That's where it's going to lead to. All right. So in terms of how to deal with it, I would say you got to realize from the get-go that there's going to be no communication. All right. Now, I know what Benjamin Franklin has written about how to change people's minds. You establish a rapport, you do that. I don't talk to anybody who doesn't agree with me. So I'm of no value in advice here. I've cloistered myself off, Jeffrey. So I only talk to the cats, to Martha, my closest friends, you, and a few other people. And I was even reticent about taking phone calls, as you know. So my advice on dealing with people who don't agree with you is probably the worst answer you're going to get in terms of real advice. At best, you can say in your heart, namaste, But the God in me sees the God in you. Bless you. We're in a universe of free will. We're all creating our realities, and I hope the best for you. But don't say it out loud. They'll get real mad.
Here's a question from Computer Care, Darryl. What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I know that I'm not responsible for anybody's memory of me. All right. And I would want only people's memory of me, if they haven't, for it to be authentic with their own reality. All right. Some people, I'm very disruptive. And it's true. I don't want them to remember me as somebody who gave them something of value in their life when it didn't. Or if it gave them value, they didn't realize it, because I was meant to be a disruptor of their present thought form. All right. A person who has taken something I've said and it was of value to them, they have their own. But I don't want to interfere with it. I've had so much judgment about me in my life that including my own, Jeffrey, that this is an area I really try and stay away from. Good question, though.
Okay. Here we go. Do you think that people's votes matter?
It does to them. All right. We live in a shared reality. All right. And that, again, is a very interesting question, because I have never voted in a presidential election in my life. All right. I graduated with a degree in political science. So it's not that I am unfamiliar with the world of politics, power, and change. All right. But I got my degree in 1966 in the midst of the tumult of the 60s. All right. And I've been reading books on power, and I'm not telling people not to vote, Jeffrey. I want to say that, or to vote. Again, I think people are getting a very different kind of reaction than what they expect with all my questions, answer to all the questions that have given to me, is that I made a choice back in 1966 that no political party represented me, all right, at all. I mean, I was a hippie, we were so outside the realm of reality that people really didn't like us, all right, the general society. And voting represents the cultural zeitgeist of which we were a minuscule part of at the time, all right? And I told you even before this, in our pre-talk, Jeffrey, I said, I realized then that the Republicans were my enemy, real enemy. Why? Now, I'm not saying that I don't believe in individual liberties. I don't believe in small business. I don't believe in entrepreneurialism. I don't believe in freedom. That's not true. I mean, I really believe in freedom. All right. I really believe in being an entrepreneur. I really believe in individual initiative. But the Republican Party, as so constituted, was the deep state. Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles, the bankers, they were the face piece. They were the ones who were behind the war. All right. So I knew from my own individual point of view that they were, quote, my enemy at the time. And I knew, and I told you this 10 minutes ago before we went on the air, that the Democrats, as far as protecting me from them, were of no value at all. And they wouldn't be. And certainly when push came to shove in the war on drugs, which was started by Nixon because he was after the anti-war hippies and the civil rights blacks, used drugs as a pretext, as admitted by John Ehrlichman, to start the war on drugs, the Democrats were of no value. During the presidency of William Jefferson Clinton, more people went to jail for drug offenses than under any other president. So the thing is it important to vote? Yes, for you. All right. If I was allowed to vote at this time, would I vote? I probably would. But I have so many felonies, I'm not allowed to. All right. And my slate is clean. So the trade-off on voting for me is if I register to vote, I'd have to go sit on a jury. And to me, it's a wash.
Here's a question from BR to change gears a little bit, Darryl, and which is what we'll be doing because the questions are covering the many different topics we've talked about. What should I do if my affirmations are not working?
Very good question. Excellent. Because this is the experience of most people. All right. And I believe that the reason why, quote, my attempt at affirmations was so successful was due to a series of factors. All right. The attempt to change reality with, we all know, or we assume, or I know that thought is creative. All right. That thought results in the precipitate that I call reality, the experience that we call reality. All right. I know that we sort of assume this too, that's why athletes now see themselves crossing the line as the winner. Now, does every athlete cross the line as a winner? There are many seen it. Before every NBA game, there are people on both sides praying that their team wins. That's an affirmation. All right. That's a statement of intent. All right. And a whole lot of people, at least half, are going to write back and say, my affirmation didn't work. The other side that won, they're going to say, oh, it worked. What did it? Was it causal? We don't know, Jeffrey. All we know is thought is creative. And so given that, even in the abeyance of you seeing any tangible result of your thought, know that your thoughts are powerful. Do not see your thought because it didn't give you the result that you wanted as being ineffectual. It may be a lot of reasons. There may be karmic reasons why we're going through a certain thing. There may be all sorts of other reasons, but do not shortchange the power of your own intention and thinking, irrespective of the outcome. All right. I mean, there was because we covered so many subjects, and there was a thing I wanted to just throw in here. And it had to do in 1960. This is before I got into positive thinking. This is before I got into right use of will. That came 1973. I mean, with Marshall's, The Lazy Man's Way to Riches, where I used thought and I visualized. This was 1968, and it speaks, I think, to the heart of the matter of having the reality that we all want. Because the only reason people do affirmations is to get the reality that they want. All right. This was 1968. My wife and I, we were coming off of acid in the Haight-Ashbury. I remember it. I remember it like now. And these words came out of her mouth. You can never have it the way you want it. Which is not to say it cannot be exactly as you want it. Only you can never own it, for it is only lent and must be renewed with gratitude at every moment. I think that statement is the greater context for all the things that we're trying to do. I know that the reason why we do affirmations is to have the reality the way we want it. I know that. And I know that for the vast majority of people, it doesn't seem to work. Even though with me, it worked to an extraordinary degree. But that was my own lesson. Whether that lesson is for other people, because I was told at times not to do it. So we're trying to figure out how to get through this thing that seems to be constantly changing and truly overwhelming. And my only answer then is to your thoughts is ask. Go into the quietness of your self, which is holy. Go into the quietness of your mind, if we can do that, and ask the question, should I continue affirmations, or what should I do? Or there's probably even a bigger question. What do I need to do to get what I want? Or maybe you should ask, will you help me? You with a capital U, me with a capital M. Will you help me?
And Darryl, here's a question from Sam Rick. When you hear a voice speak to you, not from a physical source, how can you know that it's not a trickster?
By the intent of the voice. I have heard voices in my head that are tricksters, and it's from my own mind, my own doubting, nasty, little, negative, pejorative, judgmental mind. All right. It's not like because I know people have spirits. I mean, I believe in spirit possession. All right. We're all spirits. And I believe that some people, I mean, I've talked to people, Jeffrey, and it hurts my heart to hear them because I know they're telling me the truth about their beset. They're beset. All right. So I know that thing is. Now, when you hear a voice, how do you know it's not a trickster? Is to feel it. If the voice is there for advice, all right, and it's for your own good, it may not be what you want to hear, but it's for your own good, then you can go with it. I mean, I think that's true for a voice from that you hear that has no physical source, as a voice that you hear that has a physical source. You can hear a voice coming at you that gives you advice, and it's from your mother who is so mad at you, you know, that is of no value. Or that same voice can be given to you with such love that you recognize that what she's saying is true. You are the determinant of what you receive and how you receive it. The question is wonderful. How do you determine that? You determine it by what you consider the quality and the intent of it coming from and how it affects you. The universe, in my experience, is of love. Everything else that is not of love, you can tell the difference. But this does not mean it's telling you what you want to hear. This does not mean that it's going to be easy. And it does not mean that they're telling you to deny what you see right in front of your face.
Here's a question from Michael Flanagan. And he's asking you about the book, How to Do All Things. I don't know offhand if that's a book we've talked about.
Yes.
You know the book? He wants to know,
book.
How do you view that book in terms of your current perspective on spirituality?
It's there. I have found nothing in that book to dissuade me from its premises and what it has said at all. I ran into this book, Jeffrey, after I had, I told you I gave up my affirmations because of the Course in Miracles. All right, my personal at the time belief, my thought was, if I let go of control. No, they told me if I could turn control over. All right, but that's faith. All right, to he who wants my happiness. It was in retrospect I realized I couldn't really do that because I didn't trust it. I couldn't turn it over. I was holding on too tight. All right, but I did let go because I wanted every moment to be an encounter with the eternal, quote unquote. So I let go of the only control mechanism I had, lost every penny, and I had a lot of pennies, went $250,000 in debt, the house burns down, and all hell broke loose. All right. Well, it got so bad that I started picking up affirmations again. All right. I mean, I was in my state virtually penniless. The house had burned down. All right. 1 year later, I'm at a suite in Rome at the Hassler. Life is good. My life of drug dealing is resumed. I didn't say I wanted to be, but I just started doing affirmations on money. Life is good. And boom, I'm there again. And I'm feeling guilty. Not because of what I'm doing to make money. I'm a hippie. Drugs were part of our subculture. I feel guilty because I picked up the control mechanism again. All right? When I tried to let go so I would have every moment become an encounter with the eternal. That's when How to Do All Things floated into my life. I remember exactly where I found it. It was at a bookstore in San Anselmo. I was walking down the street. I looked in the window of the bookstore, and there it said, How to Do All Things, Your Guide to the Use of Divine Power. The first words in it, and you remember that we did discuss it because the first words were this: you of yourself can do nothing. But because of who you are, all things can be done through you. So all I can say is this: that book was seminal then and now in terms of a context of creation and our place in it. All right? That we're part of spirit. That because of who we are, all faith can move mountains. There are certain truths that there's no conflict at the highest level. there are certain realities that appear to conflict at lower levels only because of the level at which we're at, such as the question between determinism and free will. If you take these two questions and raise them to the top, there's no problem. But from our ambient level of the level that we walk in, they look like an outright contradiction. So, but in answer to his question, namaste, great book. No question, no thought of me about I found nothing in that. In fact, it led me to another book that I would believe even more, I believe, because it came from the same source, because of the truth of the first book. And these are the Mark Age books, which we discussed later.
Here's a spiritualist minister. Do you ever note spirit people having similar experience to near-death experiences or bardo experiences? Do they ever communicate anything about the afterlife, about karma, and about rebirth?
I don't think the fact that I'm a spiritualist minister and know what we would call a practicing spiritualist, or another person might say, I do know people who are practicing abstaining, so as to differentiate the kind of answers you get from them. When you read, when you're curious and you look at life and you read things about the after-death experience, the bardo, the life and death, you cannot help but sort of, I call things, you put them on the shelf. When I first fell into this, Jeffrey, I remember in 1967, 66, and around that time when I first encountered the Alice A. Bailey series of books called the Blue Books, extraordinary books. They were channeled through Alice A. Bailey. She was, the tail end of the Theosophist movement, they kicked her out. All right. And I remember, the Haight-Ashbury, this stuff was on, Jeffrey. This was on. We knew it was dissolving. We didn't know what was going to take its place, which is the question that's still being asked now. And I think will always be, what is going to come? But we knew that what we once thought was true never was. That's a massive experience that astrology did for me and LSD. Now, that the fundaments of what I considered real and tangible were an illusion. Not that they didn't exist at some level, but they weren't all there was. All right. And we went on and many of us went on a mad dash to figure out what really was going on. And that's something that you and I shared. I ran into you 5 years later and realized your depth of exploration was, if not equal to mine, was beyond. I read a lot, I look a lot. And even at that time, Jeffrey, I realized you were really at it. All right. So in 1967, when I ran into the Alice A. Bailey series of books, the foreword to it is by Dewal Kuhl. Even in the earliest days, they called him Master DK. Even the earliest days, they only referred to the masters with their initials, Master KH, Kuthumi. They didn't refer to them with their names like we do now, Saint Germain, Lord Lanto, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right. They was even more esoteric then. But Dewal Kuhl said in the introduction to that book, do not believe these words because they're uttered by a so-called master. But if you find resonance in them by the law of correspondence, or then take them on. All right. And what I mean by the law of correspondence is, do you find a similarity? And this is a tangential way to get back to the answering the question, because I found many evidences of of people talking about the after-death state. All right. In fact, if anybody out there is interested in, I just put down a book by Dr. Shakuntala Modi, M-O-D-I. She's a board-certified psychiatrist in West Virginia. And she sort of backed into this reality, all right? And by working with her psychiatric patients, and they went into she started hypnotizing them, light trance. And by then, she realized that there were spirits in there. She realized that they had access to other lives, that they had memories of between life states. This sort of reinforced the work of Dr. Michael Newton, who did Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, which I think a lot of your people probably have read. But Dr. Modi's book, not a whole lot of people have read, but it's really stunning. And the book that I just put down is called Memories of God and Creation. All right. I don't think very many people read it, but it's probably more information in there of the afterlife death, or what we call afterlife, because life doesn't end with the physical transition. All right. Life is eternal. Life is eternal. Existence on this plane is like a flicker. Existence itself is like a flicker. All right. In, out, in, out. Between, it's a flicker. All right. And her book, these people, she's not even giving you her conclusions. She's reporting what her patients have told her about the Akashic records, about what dying is like, about the separation from source, because she's very curious about all these things that she doesn't have firsthand experience of, and they have a memory of it. So she's using her patients as a guinea pig. Fascinating. Now, to balance that out with another law of correspondence is a book called Right Use of Will, which I've talked about because on this program before. And the reason why I bring that up is Shakatuni, Dr. Mahdi's book, is probably one of the most truthful recollections of these states that we are not familiar with, karma, all these explanations of life as we know it, and why we go through these things, because she wasn't even asking opinions. She was asking people for their experience in these hypnotic states of what they experience between life and their lessons and karmic board and stuff, which fits in with every gestalt I have about reality. But to counterbalance that with what I got from Right Use of Will, which comes from God. All right. I like to use the word alleged. And if we use the word alleged like you do in the media, we should say, well, the alleged death of Christ on the crucifix. All right. Or the alleged parting of the Red Sea. Or the alleged conspiracy that brought that the liberal media are using with Fauci and the coronavirus. The alleged. The difference between alleged and reality is up to us. It's up to us. None of us have any experience with it except our own. So all I can say is this, because it's really sort of spooky to talk to people about what God's point of view is. All right. Because we all hear it in the interim, prophets or ministers or anybody in a pulpit, or somebody's read a latest book and they'll have an opinion. But right use of will allegedly is right from the source, from the creator. All right. And for those who are curious, I suggest that they would look at that book. It was channeled. This was, I believe, one of the reasons I was in prison. I was 7 years in, and there were 7 books channeled. All right. And so it had my attention. All right. The year I got out, the 7th book was published, and in it, God said, many of you view your fathers as remote. And I've had an issue with my father. That's what astrology told me in 1967, that I have a separation from one of my parents. It was a war. That's how I knew astrology was true, because I was 22 when I heard this. I'd been at war since I was the age of 5, and I was going to last for 40 more years. And astrology told me that. The guy who did my chart. All right. That's 1967. So in 1991, when I'm getting out of prison, 92, in the last book channeled in the Right Use of Will series, God says, allegedly, God allegedly says, many of you see God as remote, controlling, judgmental, much like you view your fathers. That's what I call the law of correspondence. That's what I call in trying to parse the truth from the untruth. That's what I call how to take something, not make a conclusion about it, but leave it on the shelf. If you don't know enough to know it's true or not, don't dismiss it because it doesn't fit with your present belief system. And don't accept it because you want it to. Consider it. Have it sit there. Because if it is true, over time, and if you're honest and open, it will coalesce. You will know what is true for yourself. Because when you're only using the mind, it is the most faithless direct compass in the world. It is faithless. It serves only your ego in its untethered state. Connected to the heart, it's a GPS.
GPS, is that what you just said?
Yes. When the mind is connected to the heart, it goes from a faithless compass to your cosmic GPS.
That's beautifully put. I like that. Here's a question from Emmy Vadnais, who asks, what do you love most about the I Ching, and how has it helped you the most?
Jeffrey, you walked in my restaurant in 1971, okay? That same year, another like soul from our era, C.J. Becker, comes into my restaurant. And CJ, I don't know if you remember it, but on Ashby Avenue, right off of Grove, there was a secondhand store called Alchemy and Old Lace. All right. And CJ was typical of the Berkeley crowd at that time. He had been a graduate student in neurophysiology. His wife was a graduate student in psychology. They were both on PhD tracks at UC Berkeley. All right. CJ realized that the results that people were getting were the results that they wanted to get. So ascertaining truth through the scientific method was delusion. He dropped out. Just quit. Okay. I remember the sign in CJ's secondhand store that said, nothing here really means much of anything, so let's not get too serious about it, shall we? That was the best shoplifting sign I've ever seen in my life. CJ turned me on to the I Ching. He told me about it. I'm Chinese. My parents didn't tell me about it. So he turned it on to me in 1971. The books that I used were the ones the serious books, the Wilhelm Baines edition. All right. Carl Jung wrote the introduction to. And because of my life as a drug dealer, which had not yet happened, it was going to happen later, I broke the spine on 2 books of the hardbound Wilhelm Baines edition. I have duct tape holding the 2 things together. All right. It was radar. And what I call the I Ching now is the inner voice for the hard of hearing. Now, I needed that. Why? Hard of hearing. You know why I couldn't hear the truth? Because of my hopes and fears. My hopes and fears were so extant, Jeffrey, that I couldn't hear anything else. In fact, when I first ran into the I Ching, I thought the I Ching was sort of like my parents telling me what I could and what I couldn't do. I realized, no, the I Ching is like a good lawyer. Well, you can do this, but I don't think you should do it now. All right? So I used that book religiously. I used it. I mean, I got so into it, Jeffrey, I went and cut my own yarrow stalks, raw silk. I used to do the 50 stalks, put one aside, separate them out, 4, 4, 4. It would take a half hour to do it. And I would be able to hold every line in my mind. That was the discipline that I Ching gave me. All right. So I was into it. Well, 1985, I go to prison. Now, right before I went to prison, one of my friends from the day, like you, all right, tells me that one of his friends is doing a translation of the I Ching. And me, with my typical Darryl Schoon judgmental dismissiveness, go, just another white boy trying to get in on the trip. All right. I remember Legge, one of the early explorers of the I Ching, asked the I Ching, this is probably 19th century, whether or not he should translate it from the Chinese. And the answer he got was no. And Legge at least had the balls to admit he did. And I looked at it. It was a terrible translation because he wanted to do it so badly. All right. So I go to prison. I'm sitting there in Lompoc Federal Prison Camp, and a book gets sent to me, hardbound, Doubleday and Company, Rediscovering the I Ching by Gregory Wincup, a China scholar and interpreter of poetry. And he wrote a little note to me. He said, Darryl, check out hexagram, I think it's 29, line 4. Pits. You're a pit. You're in a pit, which is what the ancient Chinese used as prison cells. You know, being proverbially cheap. I think they figured the cheapest way to keep a person incarcerated is just to dig a hole and stick them in it. Then you don't have to put a building. And it said, through the window, gifts are passed into him, sustaining him. And that's what the I Ching was. I open up this package. I read Greg Wincup's book. I was stunned with the simplicity of it, the beauty of it. And I wrote Greg back, and I told him how amazed I was about his translation. And he said, Darryl, he said, I want to apologize for despiritualizing the book. Now I'm into spirit. I'm into it. And I said, you did not despiritualize it at all. To me, you clarified it. What people think of spirituality is the glitter and the dross. What they speak of spirituality is the incense and the chanting and the om and the ritual. Truth is truth, and it's simple. Now, the ritual can add to it. All this stuff can add to it, but what he did to the book was not despiritualize it. He went to the ancient text and stripped it down to its original meaning. Stunning book. And, you know, I sort of keep one foot in that I Ching. I'm not 1 foot, but I know what the serious, there are forums where people who are still working on the I Ching now debate and talk about versions of the I Ching, new thought about it, and Wincup's book is one of those. So that's what I want to say. It's been a touchstone of mine. It's what I still go to, Jeffrey, because I still have questions. I still wonder. It's one of the few constraints on a life. I don't like to be told not to do what I want to do. But I know I can get in trouble by doing what I want to do. I still use the I Ching for that and for direction.
Here's a question from the artist David Wood, who asks you, do you think the universe cares how we make our money?
No. Cares? No. Let me go back. Cares? Because I'm taking that in sort of a judgmental thing, that it is better to well, it's Bucky. Bucky, let's talk about Bucky Fuller. Bucky was, to me, the Renaissance man of the 20th century. And before he was 32, everything he tried was a failure. Everything. He was brilliant. Everything lost money. In fact, he got so depressed, his daughter died, and he was going to commit suicide. He tried to commit suicide, thinking about committing suicide. And at the age of 32, what happened was he found himself suspended 10 feet in the air, surrounded by light, and he heard words. And it said, everything you think is true. But if you dedicate your life towards helping your fellow man, I will take care of you. All right? Bucky wrote later that every attempt he made later to make money failed again. And as long as everything he did for his fellow man worked. Now, does that mean that Bucky's advice, it should be done to us? That if you're sitting there and you've got a job in advertising, whatever it is, and you read Bucky's thing that, oh, I should quit my job. It's not a holy work. No, the universe knows that everything's learning. Bucky even said the universe learns by making mistakes. That's why there's no judgment. That's why there's no idea. The pejorative idea of a mistake is almost implicit in the term care. Does the universe care about what you do? Yes, the universe deeply cares. Deeply cares, because the universe has an intent for growth, wholeness, and love. It deeply cares. But does it care about what choices you're making now? much less so than the previous statement. It's watching. And you have, and I have, and everyone has free will. There are people doing and making a living in what we consider the most holiest of things, spreading the word of God. And some of them are doing the work of the dark forces by what they consider the work of God. But that's a judgment.
Here's a question from Peter Seamus Gunn. How do you tether the heart and the mind?
First of all, the intent. Boy, you know, and I think it's everybody that's differently. I mean, I'm 75 and my mind is, it's like those overactive kids with HD, whatever they call it. You know, there's a teacher out there, and there's a kid in class, and she writes in the notes, says, I'm going to have trouble with Billy. All right. He is hyperactive. The mind is hyperactive. All right. Because the mind wants your attention. And the mind wants your attention because, well, like all of us, it loves attention. All right. It tends to grow when we water it. All right. So the separated egoic mind gets attention by scaring you, first of all. You're concerned because it knows that at the base operative level, we have made the mistake of believing we're separate, we're at risk, or we're at hazard in a universe that doesn't care, and the forces are arrayed against us. And that's why it looks like that to us, because we made a very basic mistake, a perceptual mistake, and we're creators, so the reflection of the mistake is all around us. So the question is, how do you tether the mind to the heart? I think the answer is intent. First of all, you have to have the intent. All right. And if you stay with the intent, you will be led in your own way. One person's path is not another. All right. You will be told perhaps the opposite things at the same time on your path if you stay to the truth of it. But eventually you will get there, because why? Your intention is to be free and at peace. And you will know that. And until then, you will know you're not there. And so what the thing is, once your intent has been set, the direction is true. Because if the intent is true for you, you will know that you haven't achieved it yet. And I think the path tries us to our limit and a little beyond, that it knows, sort of like the word of God going, I give up, I give up, I can't take it, I can't take it. And then you hear a voice goes, you're much stronger than you think. and if you want to read the words to that, it's embodied in the Grateful Dead song, The Wheel. If you can't go on, you can't get off. But won't you try just a little bit harder? Won't you go a little bit further than you've ever gone before? All of us are on that wheel. We have our own individual wheel. And there's a reason for it. And there are parts of us that made that wheel harder, but we can't judge it. I mean, we really don't know. We're just throwing crap at the wall, whether it's about our life, our actions, or somebody else's, or the gestalt. And so to keep that stuff in abeyance in the garbage can while you go about your life is probably the best advice I can give you. But that's not easy to do, because those thoughts keep pushing that can off the lid.
Here's a question from Charles Johnson. Do you believe your use of LSD had a positive or negative effect on your life?
Well, Charles, you could ask my parents. Totally positive. I believe that the box I was in, the perceptual box that I was in, was so tight that were it not for acid, I couldn't have gotten out. Now, that's a thought. That may not be true. Perhaps if I had persisted, I would have gone down another way. But that's not to say that I think that you should do that. All right. In fact, right use of will, which allegedly comes from God, recommended against the use of psychedelics. And a very dear friend of mine just made a huge breakthrough because of his use of mushrooms. Huge breakthrough. He was at the end of his rope. And and I understood it perfectly. But even though this is alleged from God, he said, I recommend against the use of psychedelics because you may have to relearn the very lessons that you learned on psychedelics. And that's true. But I will not say somebody should or shouldn't do it. And your question didn't even ask it. Did I consider it positive? 150% thumbs up. What do they give it on Yelp or Amazon reviews? 5 stars, you know? And I know somebody who had a bad trip and destabilized them for the rest of their life. I assume it did. I didn't see it. I didn't know them until it had happened. And the person they were with, it opened their person with just extraordinarily. I believe that culturally LSD was meant to happen to a whole number of us. That's what let loose the 60s. That's what opened us up to God, love, peace, joy, all of that. I mean, if we hadn't done that, we would have gone on to become, you know, one of the very curious things I read in the 1970s and 80s that somebody had gone back and interviewed a whole lot of people that had taken acid during the 1960s and 70s. And by this time, pretty much the culture at large had looked upon that as a horribly destructive thing. That all these people had lost their lives or gone crazy or no longer were doing what they were doing. All right. Very dear friend of Martha and I, Lynn, she, for example, she's our age, Jeffrey. She went to UC Berkeley too. Okay. Lynn Walters looked like a librarian. She had that look. She was a German Virgo. All right. She graduated from Berkeley with a degree in library sciences. All right. In the day. She did her graduate work at the University of Illinois in Urbana. And you know what she told me? She had all her students one night in the library when it was closed. And she had them she put rock and roll music on and had all these future librarians dance on the tables. All right. Lynn decided she wasn't going to be a librarian, and she didn't. Lynn loved that so much. She'd go to the library and check out books and make notations where the punctuation was wrong. She had an attraction to this. All right. But she didn't want to participate in adding her energy to that constrictive aspect of reality that was running us. And I know from the bottom of my heart, Lynn Walters does not regret it either. There are those who do and those who don't. I don't.
And I certainly have no regrets. I think in my life, at least, LSD was a very positive force.
Yep. Yep.
Here's 2 comments from D.E., I guess it would be pronounced Secconi. First of all, he has a message for Martha, your wife, who I've seen in the background. And the message is Wolfgang Cohen says hello.
Thank you. Wolfie, she got it.
Yeah. And the next question is, what are your thoughts on globalism?
Globalism. There's 2 things to approach this. I know the intent, or I believe I know, as much as anybody knows, that there are forces trying to control everybody's lives from a global level. Bankers, politicians, at a level that they want control, more control in everybody's life. That's what is viewed as globalism today. All right. It's not open markets. Globalism is open markets controlled by the United States or the multinational corporations. That's globalism. There's another type of globalism, though, and that's a globalism of a unity of spirit, a unity of commonality, a unity of shared purpose and concern, a coming together of like-minded individuals who know we have troubled this planet, who know that unless we do take action to fix it, we're doomed. Unless we do come together, we're doomed. Bucky Fuller wrote in his book, Critical Path, he said, mankind is in final exam as to whether the universe will allow it to continue in existence. He said, rather than being the universal problem solvers that universe intended us to do, essentially, we become universal problem creators. But Bucky went on to say, whether or not we pass this exam is not going to be determined politically, economically, religiously, or any meta level. It's going to be determined by each and every one of us in our hearts with the answer to this question. Do you want the well-being of your fellow man as much as you want yours? That's a globalism. That's not a globalism. That's a humanism. That's a humanism that joins humans in a global circle. I believe that the universe is moving. I believe that we are in final exam. And I believe that we have passed it since Bucky made that statement. And even then, it was not assured. For those who are curious about this aspect that I believe in, you might want to go to and look up Aisha North. She began putting on the internet an extraordinary series of channelings called The Manuscript of Survival. And she walked, I used to look at that every morning from 2011 to 2014 when the transmissions ended. They came from a source that she says they call themselves the Constant Companions. And they were here to advise us about what we were up against. And they talked about our planet. And this is what they said in the first transmission. We know that many of you are concerned about the well-being of your planet. Don't be. Your planet's going to survive. It's you who should be concerned about your survival. So, globalism, I understand it. I'm totally opposed to any uber centralized control of people, of elites, self-serving elites. Self-serving elites. But I'm also believing that we are one world at the highest level. We are one source. We are one being. And in a very small sense, it can be looked as globalism. In a larger sense, Jeffrey, I would posit that there's a better term called for it: universalism.
And of course, you're a minister of the Church of Universality.
Yeah. Irony of ironies.
Well, there's a related question from Armando Solorzano, who asks, what do you think of socialism?
Socialism. Socialism is an attempt to right the wrongs of capitalism. All right? Capitalism is believed by many to mean free markets. That's a canard. Capitalism is an economy, because free markets existed far before capitalism came along. What we call capitalism appeared in the 18th century, 19th century. And it brought with it many, many gifts, material gifts. All right? But it was a loaded game. It brought with it many opportunities for achievement, financial, technological, and everything. So many people have many fond feelings about capitalism. But for many, it was hell. The codification to exploit others was a part of that system. Many who will go down with a banner of capitalism hold within it what we call property rights. Oh, property rights, a concept which included at one time the lives of individual human beings in a system called slavery. So under its broad umbrella, which has been held up by the bankers who set up the system, this did not arise naturally. It did not arise out of the need to exchange goods. It arose out of the need because there was a lack of credit, which the bankers weren't going to give unless they stole the whole system, which they did. And it gave rise to 300 years of economic expansion based on credit. With the result, we have so much debt, it's going to collapse. Well, because of you, Jeffrey, you suggested I read a book called, what was it? The Alien Invasion, something like that, by Paul Levy. You suggested it. And you sent me the book, and I read the foreword, but what I never finished reading the book because I read the foreword and I realized his source material was a book that he found written by a Native American writer called, I think, Jack, I forget, Jack Forbes or something like that. He was a professor at UC Davis, and he was there after I went there. And it was extraordinary, his book. And it was called Columbus and Other Cannibals. I would suggest that those who hold up the banner of capitalism read this book, Columbus and Other Cannibals, because there was no constraint in this open-ended system or no care about others except profit. Now, there was written in the Bible, allegedly, what profited a man if he gains the world and loses his soul? Well, that's some of that crap we hear every Sunday and we think is good. But there's a truth to that, I believe. And the truth is this. I believe in free markets, as those who have followed my writings know. But I differ, because I made a huge break with that crowd in 2009 at a conference in Europe, when a group of the Ayn Rand's collectivists got along, and basically Martha and I got in trouble. All right? Got in trouble. And Ayn Rand had made a religion out of selfishness. All right? Which a whole lot of people bought. What's wrong with selfishness? Aren't you free? We're selfish. Selfishness produces achievement. All right? Self-interest is what impels civilization. And I want to, and you know, because it's a quote of mine that somehow made it to Reddit up there about self-interest. And it said, because it came out in 1992, I wrote this thing, and I said, by examining the self-interest of those involved, you will come to understand the world of nations, as well as the world of men and women. But by examining the self-interest of those concerned in their actions, you'll come to understand the nature of the self then being served. The small self, the egoic, separated, limited self, fighting, taking advantage of anybody else, any means possible to make more. What Jack, I forget his last name, called cannibals, natives who had no possessions, who had no property rights. The idea that we could own land that they saw was given to them by the Creator was an abomination. Now, I'm not taking a point of view on it. I'm just saying, I know why one thinks one way and why one thinks the other. I'm not saying we're ready to go back to that kind of truth right now. I don't know what's going to happen. But I know that the roots of selfishness that is embraced by many of those who call themselves capitalists, who limit themselves by holding that banner in a time of misuse, is tragic.
have a very interesting and good follow-up question from Bonsai Tree, one of our regular viewers, who asks, Darryl, do you believe we should be standing up to what's happening in the world?
1958, Mao Zedong, in an apparent opening of his heart, said, let 1,000 flowers bloom of criticism. A year later, most of those people were in jail or dead. Now, but that was 1958. I do believe that we should be standing up in our own way. All right? I am a very extreme person, Jeffrey. I have gone out and sort of poked at the beast more than most people have. All right? But even that, I've done so asking to eat Ching most of the time. When I sent you my manuscript for Letter to House Select Committee on Intelligence, I knew that was information that was potentially dangerous. When Betty Tadalesky read some of the stories I had in Light in the Dark Place, she was the minister at the Temple of Unified, the founder. Her husband was in the CIA. She was a former Marine. Both were former Marines. And her husband reported directly to the head of the CIA. And Betty said, the story I put in there would have gotten me killed if they knew I had it and hadn't printed it. So I am, by nature, one, at times been willing to provoke the beast. And I'm not willing, if somebody took this and saying, well, Darryl said I should stand up. Bill heard this interview, and the next day he walked down in a Black Lives Matter protest in Portland, and they killed him. How do you think about that, Mr. Schoon? His blood is on your hands. Well, it could rightfully be said that. Because I would have said in that thing, stand up. Be who you are. Be a light in a time of darkness. Now, how you apply it is on you. And I think it's getting safer to stand up. And I think it's becoming more important that we do so collectively. I think things are going to change in the very near future, but I think it's going to get a lot darker before it gets a lot lighter. But that's a personal opinion, Jeffrey.
There have been a host of questions that I've ignored, but I'm going to try and wrap them all up. Some people think that maybe from your facial features, you might be Native American, but of course you're Chinese. Your ancestry is Chinese. But as a person of Chinese ancestry, Darryl, how do you feel about Caucasians? How do you feel about racism in America?
You know, I went back into that question. My uncle, who was also Chinese, he got out of jury duty, okay? They asked him, are you prejudiced, Mr. Schoon? And my Uncle Victor said, yes, I am. And they said, well, what are you prejudiced against? He said, white people. Now, I think that got my Uncle Victor off of any jury, all right? Now, if I was convicted up in charge for any crime, I don't think I would want my Uncle Victor on that jury anyway. So it worked out for the best, all right? But the reason why my Uncle Victor thought that was that my Uncle Victor inadvertently became a pilot in World War II by accident. His brother, my Uncle Bobby, wanted to become a pilot. Victor applied and got in the Air Force merely because he wanted to get away from a woman who mother wanted him to marry. So he applied for it, got accepted in the early 1940s, and his Army uniform itched so much, it was driving him crazy. And they said, well, maybe you ought to transfer. How do you transfer? And so he applied for flight school. Well, the name is spelled Schoon. He got in. They shit when Victor showed up at flight school in Iowa. What's this Chinaman doing here? Everyone else is white. All right. But they let him in. Victor flew enough sorties over there. He qualified for the Bronze Cross, for the cross of whatever it is. All right. Flew so many missions. Everybody in his crew got that except him. He was the captain. He was the captain. So my cousin, his daughter, asked me if I could do anything about it. So I wrote a few letters, and they were all initially really positive, and nothing was done. I realized my Uncle Victor had probably offended somebody, white person, because he thought he'd been offended to such a degree he never got that honor. All right. Now, prejudice against white people, Jeffrey, some of my best friends are white. All right. All right. Now, no. I am trying, because I never was. In fact, I've been very lucky, Jeffrey, because I grew up Chinese in a racist culture. All cultures are racist. I mean, the Chinese culture is probably one of the racist cultures on the face of the earth. One of the things I realized that the Chinese had in common with the goddamn Jews was that they both thought they were superior. You know? I mean, they did. I don't know why, but they did. Certainly the Chinese did. All right? Maybe it was their barrier in growing up in a racist society, but I think it's even deeply held in that. Our race, I can describe it, is the t-shirt that each of us wears, as is our gender, as is our astrological sign. And we identify with the t-shirt and with the gender. And we have negative opinions about various astrological signs, like we do about race and we do about gender, which by and large are firmly rooted in a story that we tell ourselves. I want to tell a story about racism, only here because I think it makes the point, not that it was a very interesting thing. I was in Terminal Island Federal Prison, all right, 1990 to 1992. Level 5, next to the highest level. Guard towers, razor wire, lockdown, all right? The vast majority of those in there were people of color. People of color. I had started out at Lompoc. There was a vast majority of white people there. Why? Because Lompoc, I used to call it the penalty box of the stars. All right? That's where Ehrlichman went, Haldeman. And through divine intervention and fortune, I ended up there earlier too. So and what happened is that I look back at my life and I realized I've been very, very, very fortunate in being Chinese, growing up in a racist society. I don't blame the society for being racist. Like I don't blame people for being racist. They just are, it's their natural. I mean, how can you judge a white Southerner for being the racist asshole he is any more than you can blame a fucking jihadist raised in Syria or the Middle East who saw shock and awe when we dropped all the bombs on the Muslims? It sort of goes with the territory. Racism, judgment, who did who, wrong, whatever. So I realized that for myself, growing up Chinese was, it didn't impinge on my self-worth like it did on people who didn't have that rigid protection that the Chinese culture had around them. I mean, if you grow up gay, that's another thing. Any minority in a majority situation is going to have self-judgment about it himself or herself. People who are physically handicapped will have those same kind of judgments. All right. I was lucky in the thing that at least I grew up not having that crushing lack of self-worth because of race. But when I was in college, Jeffrey, I realized something about the Chinese culture. That great wall we put up around ourselves kept us in as much as it kept everybody else out. And being an Aquarian, I wanted out. And you know what? Acid unlocked the keys to that gate. All right? So in terms of racism, I understand people's racism. Toleration is one thing. Understanding is another. I can understand it. I am by nature an intolerant person, Jeffrey. I am so intolerant, I stay away from almost everybody because I don't want to get triggered. My joke about moving to Tucson back in the 1990s was the only conversations I would have with people are in restaurants. Oh, isn't that osso buco good? Hoping that they weren't a vegetarian at least. Because anything else I thought, I didn't want to get in it with them. Because I was so tightly wound, I might go off in public, and I have. And so what happened is, since then, being a spiritualist minister, growing spiritually, I've gotten more tolerant, more accepting in an emotional way. But I understand why humanity is in its present state. And I also understand why it cannot continue in that present state. The word unsustainable comes up a whole lot now for the earth, for economics, for spending, for the way we comport ourselves. And so I have a lot of understanding about racism. And it's a device that we almost have to get over. I mean, we have to get over it. You don't have to. Jeffrey, you can persist. This is a free will universe. Everybody on this program who's listening can stay. Right, Jeffrey, I want to tell you a story. You know, when I did my website, Darryl Schoon, I started, it was subscription only, okay? Because I had a big following around 2009, all right? And so I charged money. I was up there every day, got to be a millstone. But anyway, Martha and I decided I was just too obsessed. It wasn't worth the money. So we sent out a letter to everybody who subscribed and saying that as of a certain date, it was going to be free access, Darryl Schoon, you go up there and see my stuff. And we're just ask us and we'll send you your money back. Because I had 3-year subscriptions. 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Well, we got a letter back from somebody who had a 3-year subscription. You know, a few $100s. I said, dear Darryl, keep the money. Your insights have been more than enough for what I've gotten. I've learned a lot from you. He says, there's one area, however, I would like you to look at. You may not have given it the requisite amount of attention, and check out these websites. So we check out his websites. This is a kind, generous soul. Guy was a Nazi. I mean, a Nazi. National Socialism. All right? He was more than generous. I can understand people thinking things. We get stuck in eddies in the way of thinking, of seeing things. Just like when I was because my story was when I was at Terminal Island, I was there when a guy walks in to this prison. I mean, this is a major prison. And some guy walks in, and here we are in the cafeteria or whatever. We notice him. There's, what, 3,000 people there. I don't know how many people in this place. Everybody, you know, this is prison. I think these years were probably 10 to life at Terminal Island. And this guy walks in, and he's got a shaved head and a clear indentation. Clear. All right? Big guy, white guy. And everybody goes, ugh. And the word gets around, he was Aryan Brotherhood. And gotten into a fight at some other prison, and somebody tried to finish him off. And because Terminal Island was a hospital facility, he was sent there to recover. Okay? So there he is. Well, I used to sit there in the prison library and type a lot of stuff I was doing. And he's in the prison library. Okay? And one day we had a conversation. All right? I mean, we're all doing time. All right? And this is what because I look back in a retrospect, because what I heard about him, and I knew somehow that this was seminal. I was talking to him about perception. And I said, you know what? We think that what we see is the truth. I said, now, for example, if you became interested in Alfa Romeos, all of a sudden, you would see every Alfa Romeo on the street. You would see, and they were there before, but you wouldn't have seen them. And it's the same way about race. If you have a judgment about a certain kind of people, that's all you're going to see. And you know what? The word came later that he was going to Course in Miracles meetings at the prison. Now, I have a long history with the Course in Miracles, and I didn't go to those meetings. And I thought today it might have been good if I had. But even then, I was cloistering myself from the outside world on the inside. I had gone through that book enough times I knew what it was. And this is what it was, that conversation about perception, which leads me back to how I started this. If the world only reflects what you think, how can you tell what is true? How can you know what is true? And that isn't just for races. That's for all of us, Jeffrey.
That was very well put, Darryl. We have just 3 minutes left because we blocked out 90 minutes. And so when we get to the bottom of the hour, we're going to end this live stream. I want to thank all of the wonderful questions that have been submitted. And of course, undoubtedly, we're going to do more programs with Darryl in the future. You're very beloved. Many people have posted comments saying how much they appreciate you, Darryl.
Remember, Jeffrey, when this started, I said, I wish my parents were watching. And then I said, hey, I'm a spiritualist. I know they are.
Yeah.
I want to tell you something about what my mother said. This is how lucky I am. I am the luckiest person I know, Jeffrey. And one day I was saying this in 1983 in Italy to somebody I'd met on the plane. And he asked me about my life. This is 2 years before I was going to go to prison. I was staying at a suite at the Hassler Hotel in Rome. And I said, Andrea, I said, my life hasn't been easy, but I'm the luckiest person I know. And his question was this: what is luck? And these words came out of my mouth, Jeffrey. Luck is love's reflection shining in your path. I never forgot those words. And it reminds me of something I want to say about how lucky I am. My mother, a Chinese Scorpio school teacher, had me for a son with everything I've done. And I'm in the middle of a 10-year prison sentence at Terminal Island Federal Prison, which I just wrote you. It was at Lompoc. And she writes me this: to my wonderful, talented, rebellious son, we will always be together. I have been loved throughout all this, Jeffrey. If I had not, I wouldn't know what it was.
Well, I love you, man.
Thank you.
It's been a joy, Darryl, to be able to have this time with you, but an even greater joy to be able to share you with so many of our viewers.
Jeffrey, remember I told you what it's like with you and me in the program? Is that you found this dog that talked, and you had him at the house and everybody was amazed. You brought Glenn over and dog talked and everybody was sort of fascinated, and then Glenn says, maybe we want to share him with more people, and so you tell the dog, said, listen, he comes over and the whole place, the yard is filled with people, and you let the dog in and all of a sudden you hear, he's biting people. He's biting people. Jeffrey, get him back. Well, Jeffrey, thank you, because I don't think I would have done this with other people, and it was with you. And I know the sincerity of everybody's question, and I learned something from this. Thank you.
And for those of you watching, thank you for being with us. There.